Now let's talk about the different modules that comprise the core solution for the construction edition. So the first and most important one would be the construction module. So this serves as your core project finance module. With it, you're able to track your actuals against your budgets, manage your commitments from your subcontracts and your purchase orders, keep tab of your work in progress, forecast what you still need to spend to complete the project, and bill and claim from your customer. We also have a compliance module that allows you to keep track of any compliance documents from your suppliers and even those that are specific to the projects. We've also built out some localized features for the Australia and the New Zealand region. So we've created a TPAR reporting solution for Australia and a progress claim form that complies with the New Zealand Construction Act. We also have some light project management features within that core solution. So you're able to keep photo logs, enter project issues, enter requests for information, and even changes to the project. And these features will also be available within the app. So it's something that you can do while on the field. As we mentioned, we also have ISVs within our ecosystem. So we have Procore that really provides you with a construction project management solution, ProEst that handles your estimating, Assigner that allows on-site time tracking and management of staff, Smart Sheets for project planning, and eSign and DocuSign for paperless signing of documents. All of these ISVs integrate seamlessly with MYOB Advanced using APIs. It's worth mentioning, however, that for Procore and for Smartsheet specifically, the setup is done through configurations in the system, so it can be done by the consultants themselves. Now that we've understood what the features are, let's go into the detail of each. As we've discussed, the primary function of the construction module is to manage the finances of a project. What the module allows you is to keep track of all the expenses from your own labor, your subcontractors, your use of equipment, and even inventory. As you then progress with the project, you will be able to track them against the budgets that you've set and recognize them as part of your work in progress. If you have milestones that you need to bill against, you can process your claims through Proforma invoices. This allows you to change quantities and amounts before you post your invoice into receivables. You can also set up an approval process to release that Proforma invoice. And once you do, that then gets converted to an invoice that actually gets recognized as part of your accounts. In terms of how you bill your customer, you can bill based on a fixed contracted price with milestones, bill based on actual labor hours and materials, or by using a specified markup for all your costs. You also have the option of not billing the project at all. And within the same project, you can have different billing options. So if you have variations that will need to be billed differently, you can still manage it on the same project. Retentions are a standard feature of MYOB Advanced. It allows you to manage the retentions that are being held by your customer and those that you're holding for your suppliers and subcontractors. The system provides you with different ways to do the computation for this. You can set a fixed percentage amount or set rates depending on threshold percentages of the total contract amount. This saves you from a lot of the manual work it usually takes to compute the values for each invoice. You can also set a cap on the amount that you hold, which is usually applicable for bigger projects. At any given point, you're also able to keep track of how much of the retention has been released, which helps you then with your cash flow. Any construction project is bound to have some changes and variations at some point. These can be from a requested change in design, issues identified during construction, incidents on site, or a whole host of other reasons. Regardless of the cause, the system allows you to manage them with the original project, so you'd still be able to track their impact to the budgets that you've set and the overall profitability of the project. For greater control, you can also set up an approval process. This just ensures that any change that's made will be signed off by all the stakeholders before it takes effect. The system also has been designed to comply with the New Zealand Construction Act. This requires a contractor to separate claim amounts that are part of the original contract and those that are from variations. Subcontractors are an important part of any construction project. With that in mind, the Construction Edition provides solutions to manage your subcontracts for a project. Each subcontract that you create gets tracked as a cost commitment for your project. And as you're invoiced by your subcontractor, the costs are recognized as part of your project. You can also have specific retention settings for the subcontract. Within that subcontract too, you're able to keep track of all of the prepayments that you've made to the subcontractor already. If there are any changes, as with the main project, you can create change orders specific to the subcontract. If there are any compliance documents such as insurance and safety certificates, you can also keep track of them at this level. One of the localized features we've introduced is the ability to generate the taxable payments annual report for the Australian Tax Office. This is especially important for the construction industry as payments made for most subcontractors will need to be reported on the TPAR. The way that this has been designed in the system provides you with a lot of flexibility. You can set whole classes of suppliers to be tracked for TPAR, but you're also able to toggle the tracking at the transaction level. The information is then captured in various TPAR summary and detailed reports, which you can then use for verification and reconciliation. The TPAR summary screen in particular allows you to validate the TPAR file to be sent to the ATO. You can then identify if any supplier is missing any information before you prepare that file that you upload into the ATO's portal. To have a successful and profitable project, it's important not only to keep track of your current costs and budgets, but also to look ahead. In this regard, the Construction Edition has a couple of features that allow you to do just that. You'll have the ability to forecast your budgets across the periods your project will run for, which really allows you to better manage your cash flow. You can also project your costs based on what you've already completed, so you can determine how much more you'll need to spend to complete the project and the total cost you are to expect at the end of the project. For both features, you're able to create different revisions, so you can have different versions to aid you in making decisions for all sorts of scenarios. Tracking of compliance documents is an important requirement for any construction project, especially when it comes to matters related to safety. The Construction Edition allows you to keep track of these compliance documents at different levels. At the supplier or the subcontractor level, the project, or even a specific subcontract. You can also have the system automatically generate lien waivers for your subcontractors to sign. You can have the templates for both conditional and unconditional lien waivers and configure at which point you would want them generated. The Construction Edition has some simple project management features that should help you manage your day-to-day activities. Staff members can record issues or requests for information on site for further action. You can also store photos and drawing logs. All these transactions can then go through a workflow process to ensure that they are getting actioned or approved by the right people. You can also create submittals to document any changes in the specifications. Here's what that workflow will look like in practice. An employee may enter a request for information or raise an issue while on site, which can be done through a browser or through the mobile app. If that issue will require a change in the project's original plan, it can be converted into what we call a change request, which in turn can be subject to an approval process to convert it into an actual change order that will change the project budget. Another feature that's built in to that project management module is the ability to generate field reports. So a field report allows you to consolidate everything that you need to keep track of on site into a single document. You'll be able to keep track of your own staff's and subcontractors' hours, all the change requests or orders logged for the day, as well as any project issues, drawing logs, and photo logs for the day. Now that we've gotten an overview of the construction edition, let's go right into the system and see it in action. What I have here is the MYOB Advanced Construction Edition, just open in a browser. So with MYOB Advanced, the moment you log in, you can be taken into a dashboard like this that shows you the most important information about your projects immediately. So you can have a table like this that shows you all of your project's estimates and what your current costs to date are. In terms of how you present your data, so you have the option of using tables like the one you've seen above, or different graphs like this. And all of the elements are highly interactive. So if I start dragging around my cursor, I can actually see the actual values that I'm looking at. You also have the ability to include elements from other websites into that dashboard. So if you have a video feed from one of your sites, you can incorporate that into your dashboard too. Now, in terms of the information that you can include, since now you're going to be using the system as a project accounting tool for your construction projects, you'll be able to keep track of your profitability as well within that dashboard. Now let's see what a project would look like in the system. Now to do that, we can click on one of our projects on the table here and drill down into it. So here's an example of a project in the system. So on the top here, we can see the project ID, the customer that we're doing the project for, and in the system, we have the ability to use templates as well. So this just means that when you start a project in the system, you can select a template and it predefines most of the settings for that project immediately. You can also see that you can track the status of the overall project. And on the very right here, we can see a sort of high-level profitability project tracking for the project. So we can see the total income and the total expenses and what margins we're looking at. On the summary here, we can see all of the settings that are relevant for the whole project. So we can see at what level we're tracking our revenue and our costs, what sort of billing we've set up. So we can control when you can trigger billing for your project. So in the case of milestone or progress billing, you can do it on demand, or you can even set up periodic billings, let's say weekly, monthly, if you have more time and material engagements. Now, as we've discussed during the overview, the billing engine for projects in the system is very configurable. So you can set up all sorts of billing. So whether you're handling progress billing or milestone billing, that really allows you to bill based on what you've completed, or if you're doing time and material, that takes it from the actual costs, or even if you're doing some sort of cost plus engagement where you're putting up a markup on top of the costs that you have from your subcontractors or the cost of materials. All of those can be handled by the system because of the configurable billing rules that we have. The system also automatically allows you to hold retentions from the invoices that you send out to your customer. So you can have it set to a fixed amount like this. That's set to 5% for the whole project. Or you can also use steps, where then it allows you to set different retainage percentages depending on thresholds that you've set as part of the total contract amount that you have with your customer. You also have the ability to control whether you want to include change orders as part of your retentions and set different caps on the retention. Now let's go a little bit deeper into the details of the project. So first thing I'd like to show you are the different project tasks that we have for this one. So how you use project tasks in the system is really dependent on how you would want to break the project down. So in this case, we've broken down the construction project into different components, which use CSI codes. But let's say for a milestone project, you can also use the different project tasks as the different milestones you build to the customer. Or in the case of time and material projects, you can have them as the different costs that you incur, or even have just a single line on there that where you book your costs from your labor, from your materials, and from your subcontractors too. Now for each task that you maintain, you're able to control whether it's relevant only for your costs, only for revenue, or relevant for both. You can also control whether that particular project task is part of the original contract or a variation. And you can also set up different billing rules for each. Now, why that's important is that then it allows you to have the flexibility of having different parts of the project billed differently, but still have the ability to keep track of the overall profitability within that single project. So take, for example, you have a standard project that you build based on progress. But then you negotiate with your customer that any variation for that project is going to need to be tracked on a time and material basis. So if you didn't have that feature, you would need to maintain the variation as a separate project, which will make it then difficult for you to track your overall profitability. But in this type of setup, you can then just have it as a separate line, but billed differently. You're also able to maintain different allocation rules that allow you to track things such as your work in progress and your unbilled revenue. Now let's take a look at how you manage your budgets for a project. So to do that, let's go first into the cost budget tab here. So as you can see, we have lots of different budget lines for this project to maintain. And at the highest level on there, we can see that it's set at the project task. But then you can further break it down into what we call cost codes. So that's really what cost codes are in the system for. They allow you to break down high-level tasks into smaller elements. That's specifically for budgeting. So in this case, we have concrete as our task number 3, but we've further broken that down into the different elements that are involved with that concreting work. Now for each line of budget, you can set different quantities. So if it's a subcontractor that's going to be working, you can just set it to 1. But if you want to put specific numbers in terms of the quantities of materials that you're going to be using or the labor hours that you're expecting to use, you can do that as well. For each one, of course, you're going to be able to set an amount. And then factor in as well the impact of your change orders into that budget. So that's the cost budget side of things. Now let's look at how we can set our revenue budgets. So setting of revenue budgets in the system is especially important when you have a progress building project like this one, because this is really what determines how much you're going to be able to build. So take for example for this task, if I started raising my completion rate here from 40 to 70, I'd be able to see that it then generates a pending invoicing amount. So this means that the next time I run my billing for the project, that's the amount that's going to get billed to the customer. Now let's imagine the project is ongoing and we would like to keep track of all of the finances of the project. So the best way to do that is to go through the balances tab here. So on here we can see the total revenue that we've generated, all of the sources of our costs. So our costs from our labor, from material, from our subcontractors, and our other expenses. If we had any work in progress, it will also appear here. So how this works is that it provides you with the original budgeted amounts, what you have as the revised budgeted amounts, and then compares that against your actuals. And at the very end here, you can see that it also provides us with the variance amount and a tracking of the performance against the budget. You're also able to track on here all of the commitments that you have to your suppliers and your subcontractors. So you can see the total amount that you have from all of your open purchase orders and subcontracts. Now, if I wanted to go into more detail into those commitments, I can always go into the commitments tab here, which shows me a listing of all the individual documents that I'm tracking as a commitment. So it includes the different purchase orders that I have and the different subcontracts that I have. So what we'll do now is let's open up an example of a subcontract. So for this one, we just have a subcontract with a concreting subcontractor that's then gonna do different works for us that fall into different cost codes. Now for each one, we can put the contracted amount that we have with them. And as the subcontract progresses, we'll be able to keep track of such things, such as the different bills that we've already received from them. If they require some sort of prepayment, we can keep track of it as well. If our subcontract is for a specific change order for a project, we can keep track of it on this particular section here. And if we have compliance documents that we need to keep track of for this specific subcontract, such as insurance and safety certificates, or even site inductions, you'd be able to keep track of them here too. Now let's go back to the project to take a look at all the other sources of cost that we have for it. One of the most important things that we need to keep track of in terms of costs are the costs that we generate from our own staff or our own employees. And within the system, we've provided a way for them to enter their time against projects through what we call time cards. So if we look at this particular time card, we can see that it's for a single employee, but then we can also see that he's been able to book time against different projects. So you can do that within a single weekly time card. Now, in terms of how the cost is determined, it's going to be dependent on the employee itself, whatever labor cost rates we've set up for the project, or even the type of work that he or she will be doing. Okay, let's go back to the project so we can close the loop and bill. So what I'm going to be doing now is billing it directly through our the project, but you also have the option of doing this as part of a periodic batch job wherein you're able to build all of your projects in one go. But for our purposes now, let's do it directly on here. And to do that, it's as simple as clicking on Run Project Billing. And what it does, it takes, since we've set it as a progress bill, it's taken the percentage that we've completed and billed based on that. So as we can see, we have our project task. It's now at 70% completed. And we saw the system was able to see that originally we've only billed 30% of it. So now it's billing the remaining 40%. We can also see that the system automatically retained the amount for us that we've set on the project itself. From here, we're able to print out the pro forma invoice, email it directly to the customer for their sign off, and once they've signed off, we can then release this pro forma invoice or claim and then convert it into an actual invoice that then reflects as profit for our project. Now, specific for New Zealand, we've also created a payment claim form that complies with the New Zealand Construction Act. What it does is it creates a payment claim form that separates the different claims that are based on the original contract amount and those that are from the variations. Changes to the original plan inevitably happen with projects, so the system has provided us with a way to manage those changes. So what we have here is a change request. So this is the entry screen that the user can use to request for a change to the budgets of a project. So we can see here we're changing the budgets for this specific task, indicating what sort of costs we intend to change. We're also able to indicate the quantity. So let's say if there's going to be an increase in the number of hours that the staff needs to work, we can add that. Or if it's, let's say, going to be done by a subcontractor, we can just simply include the cost that the subcontractor is going to charge. If you have an agreement with your customer that change orders will be priced differently, you can also set up markups to increase the standard pricing that you have. Now, this change request is simply a request for a change to be made. We can incorporate an approval process for this so that we ensure that the change request is first approved by either the project manager or the other stakeholders before you can then create a change order. Here's an example of a change order that we've already created. If you notice up top here, we can see the breakdown of how the change order actually impacts both the revenue, the costs, and the margins that we have for the project. This one was created directly, but as you can see here, you can consolidate multiple change requests into a single change order. And if you want to see a further breakdown of how those revenues and costs are distributed, you can view them here on the revenue and cost budget tabs, similar to how you do it when you're looking at a project. As we mentioned when we were discussing subcontracts, you can tag specific change orders to your subcontracts. Likewise, you're also able to add compliance documents to it. So if you have specific certificates that you want to keep track as part of that change orders, you can do that as well. The next thing I'd like to show you now are the features that we have in the system to help you further streamline the budgeting of your projects. And we're able to do that in two ways. And one of them is to cost projections. So here's an example of a cost projection that I've made for a project. So we can see here some of the some of the project tasks and cost codes that we've set for that project, as well as the different budgeted costs and the actuals that we have. So these are just drawn from the project itself. The important component here is the ability to change the completion percentage. So initially, the completion percentage on here will be based on your actuals, what percentage of the budget your actuals are. But as you all know, that's not usually reflective of the truth. So you can go on site and see that even though the budget is saying that we've spent 98.67% of it, that might not represent what actually has been completed. So if, let's say, we change this to 80%, we can see now that our cost projections have changed. So the total cost to complete has changed, and what we expect to spend at the end of the project has changed as well. Another way the system helps us manage your budgets is to budget forecasts. So if you open up the project forecast screen here, let's open up an example of a project forecast. So a budget forecast in the system really allows you to break down the budgets that you've set for your project across different periods. So let's say I wanted to take this original budgeted amount of 12,000, and I wanted the system to automatically just spread this across for me across all of the periods. I can easily do that, and then it spreads it across each period for me. You'll also be able to change the monthly budgeted lines individually, and then have that roll up to your final budget. And this is important because it helps with the cash flow for your project. So you'd know for each given period how much you expect to spend. And since you can set up the forecast as well for your revenue budgets, you can then also track what you plan to receive from your customer. You can also add multiple revisions. So if you have different forecasts, let's say a worst case scenario or a standard scenario that you would want to manage, you can put both in the system and then generate all sorts of report tracking those different forecasts based on against your actuals. Now that we've covered the financial management side of projects, let's get into a discussion of the different compliance features that we have in the system. So the first thing I'd like to show you is our main compliance management screen that keeps track of all our compliance documents. So as you can see here, you can classify them according to the type of compliance document. So they can be a certificate, they can be insurance, they can be your lien waivers, notice, or any other compliance document that you would want to maintain. And for each one, you'll be able to track when it was received, when it's effective, and when it expires. And as we've mentioned repeatedly, you can actually track it at different levels. So as you can see, we have a few compliance documents here that we submit to our customers. We have ones that we submit to that our or suppliers submit to us or subcontractors submit to us. And then we can tag them at different levels as well. They can be relevant for the whole project, a specific task, or even a specific cost code. If we go further down too, we can see that some of them are generated directly from subcontracts. So again, the system just provides you with a way to manage all of the documents that you need to maintain to meet your compliance requirements at different levels in the system. The next piece of compliance that I'd like to show you is around lien waivers. So in the system, we have a way to generate lien waivers. So these are just the documents that you send to your subcontractors for them to sign off, that then renounces their right to put a lien on the work that they've done for you. Now to do that, let's go into an example of a subcontract that we have here. So you can see this is already a completed subcontract.
And if we go into the history here, we can see that we already have a bill created for it. Now, if we look at the compliance, we can see that a lien waiver was created for it. Now, how that lien waiver was created was through the payment that we've posted against the bill. So once you post the payment, you can configure the system so that it automatically creates the lien waiver for you. And in the system, we can work, lien waivers can work either for full or partial payments. They can also be conditional and unconditional lien waivers. So you can have separate templates for both. And the difference for that would be for a conditional lien waiver, this means that upon signing the lien waiver, the subcontractor automatically renounces their rights to put a lien. A conditional lien waiver, though, usually has some stipulations on it that will only trigger the lien waiver once those conditions are met. And usually that's around the receipt of the payment. So regardless if a subcontractor has signed it, it will not release the the lien unless they've received the cash. The final thing I'd like to show you today are the project management features that we have built into the construction edition. So as we discussed during the overview, we have some simple project management features that are available out of the box within the construction edition. Of course, if you would need more complex project management tools, we can use products within our ecosystem such as Procore to handle them. So to start, I'd like to open up an example of what we call a request for information. So request for information in the system is just a way for staff members to send out questions about the project. So this can be questions that they've come up with themselves, or questions that have been asked by the client on site, so that we can keep track and make sure that everything gets answered. So at any given point, you'll be able to track who the actual owner is. You can set different priorities to it. You can then determine whether it impacts the schedule of the project, the cost, or if it's a design change. If you go down here, this is where your actual question is put in, and then you can track the actual answer that was provided for it. You can create these requests for information, or you can have them generated from what we call an issue, which we'll be seeing next. A project issue is just a way for you to keep track of all the issues that have been encountered or reported on site. So if you open up the list of project issues that we have, you can see all of them that are currently active, those that they're being processed, and those that have been closed. So if I open up an example on here, so we can see that this is a project issue about a damage that was created by a crane that accidentally swung into a wall. Right? So the project issues in the system can be reported through the browser, or you can do them through the app as well. And when it comes to tagging it to the project, you can tag it at the project level, but you can also go down to the task level. So why that's important is that you can then later on convert this issue into a change request that then updates the budget for your project. Alternatively, if it's a question that needs to be raised to someone else, you can simply convert it to a request for information. So on here you have as well an owner that keeps ownership of the project issue, right? And then you can also set different issue types for further classification. And once the issue has been resolved, you can simply close the project issue. We've also provided a feature to log all of your drawings and photos for individual projects. So let's open up an example of a photo log here. So as you can see, we can store a photo that was taken on site, tag that to a specific project, or even further down into a project task. right? So you can have multiple photos with that single log, and you can have different revisions to it as well. Here's an example of a drawing log. So again, similar to the photo logs, you can have multiple revisions to it. You can have multiple files included on there. And as with many things within the project management module here, they can all be integrated to other documents. So from here, you can create a new request for information or a new project issue. The very last thing I'd like to show you now is a way to consolidate all of these documents into a single document that you submit at the end of the day. So we have what we call a daily field report. We're going to have those things as part of a single submission that you provide daily. So on the daily field report, as you can see, you can indicate all the labor hours of the staff that were on site, can keep track of all of the change requests that were submitted. If any of them were converted to change orders, you should be able to find them here as well. And the tracking of the hours of your subcontractors for that day. Also keep track of issues, your photo logs, and any other notes. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank